What if everything you've ever known, every silk curtain, every diamond smile, every carefully constructed dream, shattered in a single night? What if the people who raised you to be perfect were the first to cast you out the moment you fell? One moment, the world applauds. The next, it devours. But when the lights go out, when the applause fades and the masks drop, who do you become? And what if, in your darkest hour, a stranger offers you the unthinkable? Not a rescue, but a deal. Would you say yes? Stay. Because this is not a story about falling. It's about what happens when you decide to rise. Ivy Quinn had never known anything but perfection. At 26, she was the embodiment of New York elite, elegant, poised, magnetic. The kind of woman people stared at from behind champagne flutes and whispered about with equal parts admiration and envy. She was the only daughter of the Quinn dynasty, old money, old rules, old power. From ballet recitals in Paris to summers in the Hamptons, her life had been curated with the precision of a royal bloodline. And tonight, she was to be crowned. The ballroom at the St. Regis shimmered with crystal chandeliers and rose gold accents. Champagne flowed like a promise. Laughter echoed beneath ceilings gilded in tradition. It was the engagement party of the year. Ivy stood in her designer gown, silk ivory, off-shoulder, custom fit from Milan, waiting at the top of the marble staircase. Her heart fluttered, not from nerves, but from anticipation. Elliot Carter, her fiancé, was moments away. The man with the perfect jawline, perfect career trajectory, perfect future. And tonight, in front of New York's most powerful families, he would make it official. She checked her reflection in the mirrored wall. Flawless. You've been trained for this your whole life, she whispered to herself. Smile. Be perfect. But as the clock ticked, Elliot didn't come. He arrived 20 minutes late. Not alone. Every head turned as he entered the ballroom, arm in arm with Celeste Monroe, daughter of the Monroe shipping empire. Stunning. Smirking. Wearing red in a sea of ivory. The room tensed. A few gasps. A few whispered, "Isn't that?" Ivy froze at the top of the stairs, her breath caught in her throat. No. Not here. Not like this. Elliot raised his glass and smiled, too wide, too rehearsed. Ladies and gentlemen, he called out, his voice cutting through the music, thank you for joining us tonight. I have an important announcement. He turned toward Ivy. And then the world tilted. I won't be marrying Ivy Quinn. Gasps. Silence. The sound of something glass shattering in the distance. I've come to realize, Elliot continued, voice slick with arrogance, that this engagement was never about love. It was about status. Power. And I'm done pretending. He gestured to Celeste, who beamed like a pageant queen. This is the woman I choose. The one I actually want by my side. Ivy couldn't breathe. Her heart slammed against her ribs like a warning siren. And then came the dagger. Elliot looked right at her and said, You were a beautiful arrangement, Ivy. But I don't need arrangements anymore. Celeste laughed, tossing her hair back. Poor Ivy. Even perfection gets boring, huh? Laughter. Not kind laughter. Cruel. Sharp. Echoing. Ivy turned to find her mother in the crowd, Vivienne Quinn, the Iron Queen of Manhattan society. But there was no sympathy in her eyes. Only disgust. You've humiliated us, Vivienne hissed, pulling Ivy aside as guests resumed their whispers. He was your only job. And you failed. He blindsided me, mother. You should have seen it coming. You should have kept him. Managed him. Now look at you. Vivienne's voice was cold. If you cannot secure a marriage that elevates this family, then you are no longer part of it. An hour later, Ivy stood on Fifth Avenue in that same silk gown, clutching her phone, her clutch, and nothing else. No car. No money. No home. The driver was dismissed. Her accounts frozen. Her name, for the first time, held no weight. The heels pinched. The night air stung. A few blocks away, the city lights glittered as if mocking her. She had once belonged to that world. Now, she didn't even have a place to sleep. And that's how the girl who had everything lost it all in one single, brutal, public blow. But the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The streets of Manhattan no longer sparkled. They sneered. Ivy walked with no destination, her designer heels echoing against the slick pavement. The same city that once bowed for her now turned its back without hesitation. Faces blurred past. Cabs honked. Laughter spilled from restaurants and rooftop bars, that world still spinning as if hers hadn't just imploded. Her gown clung to her skin, soaked from a brief rain, dirtied at the hem. Her makeup smudged, her mascara trailing like battle scars down her cheeks. She had walked this avenue 1,000 times before, always in control, always admired. Tonight, she was invisible. "You were a beautiful arrangement, Ivy." The words replayed like a curse. She kept walking. Past the designer boutiques, past the bouncers who once greeted her by name. Past the five-star hotels and the places where she'd never once felt out of place. Until now. The bar appeared like a forgotten secret wedged between two closed storefronts. No name, no neon lights, just a heavy wooden door and faint jazz floating through its seams. Ivy hesitated. This wasn't her kind of place. But then again, she wasn't her kind of girl anymore. Inside, the bar was dim, quiet, lived in. Warm amber lights bathed worn leather stools and shelves lined with dusty bottles. A slow trumpet whispered from the speakers. The bartender looked up, surprised. She clearly didn't belong. But he said nothing. Ivy slid onto a stool at the far end, shivering slightly. "Whiskey," she said, her voice hoarse. "Neat." The man 2 stools down glanced sideways. His profile was sharp. Dark stubble. Worn leather jacket. A simple watch with a scratched face. Everything about him was understated. Except his eyes. They were steel gray and piercing, like they'd seen too much, and didn't bother pretending otherwise. He didn't speak. Just sipped his drink. The bartender slid Ivy her glass. She drank like it was medicine. Another. Another. And then, her words tumbled out like broken glass. "I was supposed to be engaged tonight," she said, not looking at him. "I had the perfect dress. The perfect man. The perfect stage." Silence. She took another sip. "Turns out the man just needed my name. My family's money. He dumped me in front of 500 people. With another woman on his arm. Still, he said nothing." Ivy laughed bitterly. "Do you want to know the best part? My own mother sided with him. Told me if I can't lock down a powerful husband, I'm not her daughter." A pause. Then the stranger spoke. His voice was low. Rough velvet. "So what now?" She turned to him, eyes glassy. "Now? I have nowhere to go. No plan. No future. Just a really expensive dress, and no one left to care." He studied her for a moment. "If you need a husband," he said slowly. "I could help." Ivy blinked. "What?" He shrugged. "It's just a thought." She let out a shocked laugh. That's the craziest thing I've heard all night. He raised an eyebrow. And yet, you're still listening. She stared at him. For the first time that night, she didn't feel pitied. Or judged. Or invisible. There was something strangely grounding about him. He wasn't shiny. He wasn't elite. He wasn't fake. He was real. And that, in this moment, was more intoxicating than the whiskey. Outside, the rain began again, softly tapping the windows. Inside, Ivy turned her glass slowly, considering the absurdity of it all. Then she looked him dead in the eyes. "All right, mystery man," she said. "Let's get married." Morning light slanted through thin curtains, brushing against Ivy's face like a hesitant touch. She stirred, blinking up at a ceiling she didn't recognize. No silk canopy. No gold trimmings. Just plain white plaster, and the distant sound of traffic. Her head throbbed. Her mouth was dry. And her hand. A cheap silver band clung to her finger. She sat up slowly, the memories of last night rushing in like cold water. The bar. The whiskey. The man with the storm-gray eyes. And her own voice, half laughing, half daring. "Let's get married." She looked around. The apartment was small. Clean. Lived in. A brown leather couch sat opposite a vintage TV. A single bookshelf lined with worn novels and travel guides. The faint scent of coffee drifted in from the cracked kitchen door. Her eyes landed on a note folded neatly on the nightstand. "Coffee's on the stove. There's toast if you're brave. If you're wondering, yes, this is real. K." She laughed. A sharp, confused breath of disbelief. "Oh my God. What have I done?" Living with Knox Wilder was like being dropped into a foreign planet, where the laws of her old life no longer applied. There was no maid to draw her bath. No private driver waiting downstairs. No platinum credit card on the counter. Instead, there was Knox in a threadbare t-shirt, frying eggs while humming old blues tunes. There were shared laundry baskets. Grocery runs. Water leaking under the sink that he fixed with duct tape and a muttered "this'll hold for now." Ivy tried to make the bed and ended up tangled in the sheets. She burned toast. Twice. She stood in front of a subway turnstile for 5 full minutes before realizing it didn't accept her old black card. "You've officially survived day 1, Knox said that night, handing her a bowl of instant noodles. "Tomorrow we'll aim for not lighting the kitchen on fire." "I was raised on foie gras," she muttered. He smirked. "And now you're slurping ramen with a criminally attractive stranger. Life's funny, huh?" Despite herself, she smiled. Not because things were perfect. But because, for once, she wasn't performing. And still, something didn't add up. Knox teased her endlessly, but there was a calm to him. A precision. When he read, his eyes didn't skim, they devoured. When he watched the news, he paid attention to market trends, not gossip headlines. And when he drank wine, he didn't just sip, he tasted, noting region and year like a sommelier. She caught him once, fingers tracing the spine of a book titled Advanced Investment Strategy. "Didn't take you for a Wall Street guy," she said. He didn't look up. "I'm not. But you know your stuff." A half smile. "Let's just say I've lived a few lives." Then there was the closet, a seemingly innocent storage space she stumbled into while looking for a mop. Instead, she found a duffel bag. Stuffed with stacks of $100 bills. Tens of thousands. Neatly bound. Untouched. She stared at it, frozen. The air felt heavier. The room, quieter. When Knox came home, she confronted him. Her voice trembled more than she wanted it to. "You said you were broke." He looked at her, calm as ever. Not denying. Not explaining. Then, "I said I wasn't rich." "There's a difference. Where did that money come from?" Knox leaned against the counter, his gaze unreadable. "Trust me, Ivy. You'll know everything. Soon." And with that, he turned away, leaving her with 1,000 questions. And a growing suspicion that the man she married on a whim might not be a stranger at all. It started with a dust rag and a half-empty box of old books. Ivy had been cleaning, yes, actually cleaning, something she'd never done in her past life. There was something oddly satisfying about it. Real. Tangible. Until she reached the top shelf of Knox's closet and pulled down a weathered manila envelope wedged between two travel guides. She wasn't snooping. Not really. But when a page slipped free and floated to the floor, she couldn't help but notice the headline. "Missing Heir, Knox Alexander Wilder vanishes without a trace." Ivy froze. Her heartbeat stuttered. The article was dated 3 years ago. The image below the headline, grainy, candid, but unmistakably him, stared back at her in black and white. Same jawline. Same eyes. Just cleaner. Sharper. Wearing a tuxedo and a billion-dollar smile. The article detailed the unexplained disappearance of the only son of Alistair Wilder, founder of Wilder International, a global conglomerate with holdings in aerospace, tech and finance. According to the article, Knox had vanished shortly after a high-profile fallout with the board. No ransom. No body. No leads. Declared legally dead last year. Heir to one of the largest fortunes in America. And he was frying eggs in her kitchen 3 hours ago. She waited. Waited until the apartment filled with the scent of rain and the soft creak of the door opening. Knox walked in, jacket slung over one shoulder, humming like nothing had changed. Ivy stood in the center of the living room, holding the article like a weapon. "You lied to me." He stopped. His gaze flicked to the paper in her hand. Then to her face. And he didn't flinch. "I didn't lie," he said softly. "I just didn't tell you everything. You disappeared. You faked your own death." He exhaled, slowly. "Set the jacket down." "I left, Ivy. I walked away from a life that wasn't mine anymore." "You're Knox Alexander Wilder," she hissed. "You're one of the richest men in the country. And you let me think you were some broke guy with ramen noodles and a duct-taped sink." "Because I needed to know," he said, stepping closer, his voice even. "I needed to know what it felt like to be wanted for me, not the empire. Not the bank accounts. Not the headlines." Ivy shook her head, eyes stinging. "You used me." "No. I protected myself. I protected us. Tell me honestly, if you had known who I was the night we met, would you have still said yes?" She opened her mouth. Closed it again. And that silence said everything. He walked to the window, staring out at the glittering skyline like it mocked him. "My entire life was pre-written, Ivy. Every friend chosen, every deal arranged, every woman curated." He turned back to her. "I wanted to find someone who didn't see the name. Who saw me." Her heart was pounding. She wanted to scream, to walk out, to slam the door behind her. But she didn't. Instead, she asked, quietly, "So what happens now?" Knox stepped toward her, slowly. "Now," he said, "you know the truth. All of it. And I have only one question to ask you." He took her hand, held it gently. Now that you know who I really am, do you still love me? Ivy looked into his eyes, those same storm gray eyes that never needed diamonds to shine. She thought about the cheap apartment, the shared meals, the laughter, the unexpected safety she'd found in his arms. And she realized none of it had changed. Not the way he made her feel. Not the woman she'd become because of him. I don't care about your money, Knox. A pause. I care about you. The invitation had come in a white envelope with gold embossed lettering. The Ascend Foundation Annual Gala. Black tie. Manhattan. A who's who of old money and new power. Ivy hesitated the moment she saw it. Her fingers hovered over the RSVP. Do I really want to go back there? But Knox, as always, had only offered a quiet shrug and that infuriatingly calm voice. Face it. Don't run from it. The ballroom gleamed with crystal and excess. Familiar. Cold. But Ivy walked indifferently now. Not in a designer gown pre-approved by her mother. Not with a man chosen by boardroom whispers. She wore a sleek black dress of her own choosing, her head high, her heart steady. And at her side, Knox. No tucks with flash. No attention-seeking bravado. Just simple black. Clean lines. Controlled power. He didn't need to flaunt. He was the storm. They barely made it to the second glass of champagne when she saw them. Elliot. Celeste. He was thinner. A touch of grey at his temples. The charm still there, but dulled by something Ivy recognized too well, loss. The fall from grace. A whisper trailing behind him like perfume. He bet on the wrong deal. Lost everything but the watch on his wrist. Celeste clung to his arm, her glow dimmed. Less queen, more caution. She offered Ivy a once-over and a week, brittle smile. Well, Elliot said, breaking the silence with a smirk. Look who decided to rise from the ashes. Ivy tilted her head, cool as ice. Elliot. Always a pleasure to see someone trip on their own ego. His smile didn't falter. I hear you've traded diamonds for denim. He gestured subtly toward Knox's understated attire. Still slumming it, Ivy? Knox didn't react. He took a sip of his drink, then calmly stepped forward, extending a hand. Knox Wilder. Husband. Elliot's jaw twitched. Wilder. Before he could process it, Knox continued, voice like velvet laced with steel. I understand your company took quite the hit last quarter. That Saudi tech acquisition was a misstep. Shame you didn't vet the board better. Elliot's expression flickered. Knox offered a polite smile. I own 30% of that board now. Silence. Celeste's eyes widened. Elliot paled. Ivy smiled, not cruelly, not smugly, but with something stronger, closure. She stepped in, her voice calm and crystalline. Thank you, Elliot. Truly. If you hadn't humiliated me, I would have stayed trapped in a life designed for someone I never wanted to be. She looked at Knox, her gaze soft. Because of you, I found something real. I found someone who sees me, not what I represent. She turned back to Elliot, her smile unwavering. So, thank you for walking away. You gave me the space to find something better. They walked away, hand in hand, leaving silence in their wake. And for the first time, Ivy didn't just feel powerful. She was. It was almost midnight when Knox led Ivy up the final flight of stairs. The rooftop was quiet, the city below glowing like a bed of fireflies. String lights twinkled above them, strung between steel beams, casting golden halos over the garden Knox had somehow created up here. Soft ivy climbing trellises, lanterns flickering in the breeze, and a single table for two, still warm from dinner. Ivy turned slowly, taking it all in. "When did you even plan this?" Knox smiled. "Who says I ever stopped planning?" He took her hand and guided her toward the edge, where the skyline spread endlessly across the horizon. Her eyes danced across the view, until she turned back and found him on one knee. Her breath caught. This time, there was no audience. No champagne towers or society photographers. Just him. Just her. Just truth. "Ivy Quinn," he said, voice low and sure. "That night in the bar, I offered to marry you on impulse. You said yes, half laughing, half crashing. And you saved me more than you'll ever know." He held up a simple ring. Gold. Elegant. Real. "So now I'm asking again. Not because we're running. Not because we need to fix each other. But because I love you." A pause. "Will you marry me, this time, because you truly want to?" Tears shimmered in Ivy's eyes as she looked down at the man who once made her question everything, only to help her find everything that mattered. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This time. Absolutely yes." Years passed, but the world didn't go quiet. Ivy and Knox built a life not out of wealth, but out of meaning. Together, they founded Haven Rising, a non-profit dedicated to helping women escape abusive homes, reclaim their voices, and begin again, just as Ivy once had. Their home was filled with laughter, chaos, and warmth. Especially after the twins were born, Leo and Lila, a storm of curls, tiny sneakers, and endless questions. Knox read them bedtime stories in a gravelly voice, always adding sound effects. Ivy would sit nearby, watching him with a heart so full it sometimes hurt. One evening, Ivy sat alone on their porch, watching the sun melt behind the hills. Leo and Lila were chasing fireflies. Knox was in the garden, humming some blues tune she'd never quite learned. And she thought back to that night. The night everything fell apart. She had believed losing money, status, reputation meant losing everything. But she'd been wrong. She had lost the illusion. And found, in its place, something real. Not a life curated. A life chosen. She smiled to herself and whispered, "I never needed a perfect life. I just needed the right one." Sometimes, the most painful losses lead us to the most extraordinary beginnings. Ivy Quinn had everything until she didn't. Stripped of wealth, family, and the life she thought was hers, she was forced to confront a truth far more valuable than any diamond: that identity isn't forged in privilege, but in resilience. In choice. In the quiet courage to start over. She lost her name, her place, her plan. But in that loss, she found something greater. Love that asked for nothing. Love that saw her, not for what she could offer, but for who she truly was. And in that, she discovered the rarest kind of freedom. Not the freedom to be perfect, but the freedom to be real. Because in the end, the most priceless thing any of us can find is a love unshackled by status, untouched by vanity, and rooted in truth. That's the life Ivy chose. And it was worth everything.